Welcome to Headline Hub Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. The news broke like a thunderclap, an announcement that would ripple through every corner of North America. In a matter of minutes, the world changed for millions of people as the headlines blared across every screen and device. The United States had just imposed a staggering 30% tariff on Canadian dairy and autos, sending shockwaves through industries that had long depended on open borders and predictable trade. Television screens across North America flashed urgent banners, the words "trade war" and "tariff shock" scrolling in bold red letters. Airports, offices, and living rooms alike were transfixed by the unfolding drama. In Wisconsin, a family stared at their cold coffee, the morning routine shattered by the uncertainty of what this meant for their farm, their jobs, and their future. In Windsor, Ontario, auto workers felt a sudden anxiety settle over the factory floor. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as the news spread, and the hum of machinery seemed to falter under the weight of worry. The abstract world of trade policy had just become brutally personal. What once seemed like distant negotiations and political posturing was now a force that could upend paychecks, businesses, and entire communities. On trading floors, panic set in. Stock prices for Ford and GM plummeted within minutes, erasing billions in value. The Canadian dollar nosedived, making imports more expensive and fueling even more uncertainty. At the Ambassador Bridge, truck drivers faced new paperwork, longer waits, and crushing fees. What was once a routine crossing had become a logistical nightmare, with every shipment now a gamble. The seamless flow of goods that had defined the border for decades slowed to a crawl. Lines of trucks stretched for miles, engines idling as drivers and companies scrambled to adapt. For ordinary citizens, confusion and fear set in. Questions swirled. Would prices rise? Would jobs be lost? Would this be the start of something even bigger? Grocery prices in Montreal crept up almost overnight. Dairy aisles looked emptier and price tags were quietly replaced with higher numbers. Shoppers exchanged worried glances, wondering how far the increases would go. In Michigan, families gathered around dinner tables, bills spread out before them, trying to make sense of what the future might hold. Parents reassured their children, but their own voices trembled with doubt. The trade war, once a distant headline, had arrived at their dinner tables. Conversations about school and sports were replaced by talk of layoffs, rising costs, and the fear of what tomorrow might bring. This was not a subtle adjustment. It was an economic bombshell. Factories closed their doors, main streets emptied, and the sense of security that had defined border towns evaporated almost overnight. For generations, the US-Canada border was a seam, not a barrier. Families, businesses, and communities moved freely, building lives that spanned two nations. Businesses and lives were built on that stability. Farmers, shop owners, and factory workers all depended on the certainty that goods and people could move without fear or friction. Now, that stability was gone, replaced by uncertainty. Empty shops and shuttered factories became the new reality, as business owners wondered if they could survive the storm. The invisible lines on the map had become very real, very high, and very expensive to cross. What was once a symbol of partnership was now a wall of paperwork, fees, and frustration. The shockwave was only just beginning. Across the continent, people braced for what would come next, knowing that the world they knew had changed in an instant, and that the aftershocks would be felt for a long time to come. From the White House Rose Garden, President Trump framed the tariffs as a necessary correction, not aggression. He argued that Canada's dairy system was protectionist, locking out American farmers and inflating prices. The 30% tariffs were a lever to force Canada to open its markets. For many in the Rust Belt and rural America, this was a promise kept, a fight for the American worker. Critics warned that tariffs would backfire, hurting both economies and disrupting deeply integrated supply chains. But in the political climate of 2025, the simple message of America First drowned out the warnings. The stage was set for a high-stakes economic showdown. Canada's response was swift and defiant. Within hours of the US announcement, Canadian leaders convened emergency meetings in Ottawa, determined to show the world that Canada would not be bullied or pressured into submission. The mood was resolute and the message was clear. Canada would stand its ground, no matter the cost. The Prime Minister took to the podium, unveiling a package of dollar-for-dollar retaliatory tariffs. These weren't just any tariffs. They were carefully chosen to hit politically sensitive US exports, including Kentucky bourbon, Florida oranges, and Wisconsin cheese. The move was calculated to send a message to Washington, while also rallying support at home. At the heart of Canada's response was the bold Dairy Sovereignty Act, quickly dubbed the Forever Shield. This landmark legislation made it illegal for any government to negotiate away Canada's cherished supply management system without first holding a binding national referendum. It was a powerful safeguard, designed to protect Canadian farmers and ensure that the fate of the dairy industry would always rest in the hands of the people. This was more than just a policy decision, it was a declaration of national identity and pride. Across the country, Canadians rallied behind the Forever Shield, seeing it as a symbol of their sovereignty and determination to defend their way of life. In a rare show of unity, opposition parties set aside their differences and stood shoulder to shoulder with the government. Buy Canadian campaigns sprang up overnight, with citizens flocking to support local businesses and products, determined to weather the storm together. But the dispute quickly spiraled into a full-blown trade war. The auto industry, a cornerstone of the Canadian economy, found itself caught in the crossfire. Assembly lines slowed, border crossings became choked with delays, and uncertainty rippled through factories on both sides of the border. Diplomatic channels, once busy with negotiation, fell silent. Meetings were cancelled, embassies closed their doors, and officials on both sides braced for a prolonged standoff. In Washington, the Forever Shield was seen as a bold act of defiance. American officials and media outlets declared that Canada's hardline stance had made compromise nearly impossible, deepening the rift between the two allies. As the path to de-escalation vanished, millions of workers and small business owners whose livelihoods depended on cross-border trade faced an uncertain and anxious future. The economic fallout was felt in communities large and small, with jobs and businesses hanging in the balance. The standoff had become about more than just tariffs or trade agreements. It was now a battle of pride, identity, and national resolve, with both sides unwilling to back down. At the center of the conflict is Canada's supply management system. Built on production quotas, price controls, and import restrictions, it guarantees stable incomes for Canadian farmers and consistent supply for consumers. High tariffs on imports protect the system, precisely what the U.S. targeted. Canadian farmers see supply management as their lifeline, shielding them from global price swings and preserving family farms. Critics argue it inflates prices and stifles innovation. For American farmers, it's pure protectionism, a lucrative market next door, locked away. This fundamental disagreement over fairness and sovereignty is the core of the trade war. Neither side is willing to budge. The dairy wall stands firm. On his Quebec farm, Jean-Luc Dubois stands among the fields his family has tended for generations. He feels a deep sense of pride in his work, knowing that every sunrise brings new challenges and rewards. Yet beneath that pride, a growing sense of worry gnaws at him. A worry that the world he knows is changing in ways he cannot control. The Forever Shield, a policy designed to protect his way of life, offers some comfort, but Jean-Luc can't shake the fear that the shield comes at a steep price. He wonders what will be left if the bonds with his neighbors across the border are broken for good. The cost of a fractured relationship, he knows, could last for generations. "They are not our enemies," he says of American farmers, his voice heavy with emotion. "We have always worked together, shared knowledge, and faced the same storms. We are the ones who will pay the price," he adds, frustration and sadness etched into his features. The decisions made in distant capitals feel far removed from the realities of rural life. Across the border in upstate New York, Sarah Miller walks through her family's dairy farm, the same land her grandparents once worked. Her hopes for the future are fading, replaced by uncertainty and fear. The tariffs, intended to help American farmers, have instead deepened her struggles. Equipment sits idle, and the once busy milking parlor is now eerily quiet. The sense of community she once felt with her Canadian counterparts has been replaced by suspicion and loss. "Our closest customer is now our adversary," she says, her voice trembling. "We used to celebrate each other's successes. Now, we're forced to compete in ways that hurt us both." "We're caught in the middle," Sarah continues. "We didn't ask for this fight, but we're the ones living with the consequences every day." Jean-Luc faces rising costs for American equipment, each invoice a reminder of how interconnected their livelihoods have become. What was once a simple purchase now feels like a gamble, with prices climbing and uncertainty growing. Meanwhile, Sarah watches as her surplus milk is dumped at a loss, the result of markets closing and opportunities drying up. Each gallon wasted is a blow to her family's future. Both Jean-Luc and Sarah worry about the future of their farms and the goodwill that once united their communities. The border, once a line of friendship, now feels like a wall. Town hall meetings are filled with anger and confusion. Farmers demand answers, but solutions seem out of reach. The sense of unity that once defined these rural towns is fraying. Politicians arrive with promises and speeches assuring farmers that relief is on the way. But as the months pass, nothing improves. The gap between words and reality grows wider. The tariffs, meant as a weapon in a larger conflict, have backfired, creating new barriers and shared pain. Trucks sit idle at the border, and once thriving trade routes are now blocked. For farmers on both sides, the trade war is not an abstract policy, it's a daily struggle for survival. Every bill, every late night in the barn, is a reminder of what's at stake. The human cost is real, and the wounds run deep. Families gather around kitchen tables, searching for hope and answers that never seem to come. In this conflict, there are no easy victories, only shared hardship, and the hope that someday, the bonds of trust and cooperation can be rebuilt before it's too late. The trade war's impact spread quickly, touching millions of lives. In Canadian cities, grocery prices climbed as tariffs hit U.S. goods, wine, oranges, cereal. Families on tight budgets felt the squeeze. The border, once open, now felt like a wall. Buy local movements surged, driven by necessity. In the U.S., the pain hit jobs. A small Ohio factory lost Canadian orders and laid off workers. Businesses on both sides delayed investments, wary of sudden policy shifts. Economic growth slowed, and uncertainty became the new normal. For families, this meant fewer job opportunities and stagnant wages. The trade war was no longer just a headline. It was a shadow over daily life. The ripple effects were everywhere, from grocery aisles to factory floors. Instability had replaced predictability. Nowhere was the pain sharper than in the auto industry. The sector's cross-border supply chains, built for efficiency, were shattered by the tariffs. Truck traffic at the Ambassador Bridge slowed to a crawl. Assembly lines in Ontario and Michigan halted for lack of parts. Layoffs rippled through communities built around the auto sector. The tariffs, meant to protect jobs, instead destroyed them on both sides. The idea of an American-made or Canadian-made car became meaningless. These were North American cars, products of shared effort. The trade war exposed the folly of treating an integrated industry as two separate entities. In the end, both countries lost. Beyond economics, the trade war shattered trust between two close allies. The US-Canada relationship, built on shared values and cooperation, was deeply damaged. Labeling Canada a national security threat to justify tariffs was seen as a betrayal. Goodwill built over generations eroded overnight. The Forever Shield law in Canada was a direct response, a sign that trust had been replaced by suspicion. Cooperation on everything from security to the environment became harder. Rebuilding trust will take years, if not decades. The economic wounds may heal, but the scars on the relationship will linger. The greatest cost of the trade war may be the loss of partnership itself. Trust, once broken, is hard to restore. As the dust settles, it's clear there are no winners. American farmers haven't gained new markets, the auto industry is fractured, families pay higher prices, jobs are lost. The trade war's lesson is harsh. Economic walls hurt both sides. The Forever Shield law and lingering resentment remain. Rebuilding cross-border relationships will take more than a new deal. It will require a conscious effort to restore trust. Yet, amid the wreckage, hope persists. The shared history and deep connections between Canadians and Americans endure. Their prosperity is intertwined. The ultimate lesson: the US and Canada are more than trading partners. They are neighbors, allies, and family. Healing will come not from building walls, but from working together to keep the doors open.